joined by Dr. Rick Holm. Dr. Holm, good morning.
Good morning.
A couple of guests here will have to share a microphone. Good morning and welcome. Thanks for coming up.
Good morning.
Welcome everyone to Prairie Doc Radio. We're glad to have you listening. My name is Joni Holm, and we have two in-guest studios. Megan, okay, tell me again.
Lavacek.
You're real close there. Lavacek. I was trying. And she is a healthy foods coordinator with the Department of Health here in the state and a registered dietitian. And we also have Jen Anderson, who is an assistant professor in communication studies, and she specializes in health communications. And Rick, if it's okay with you, let's ask our guests to tell the audience exactly why they're here right now to talk about breastfeeding in Brookings.
Right. Jen.
Sure. So we are partnered with the South Dakota State Department of Health, and they are working on a breastfeeding-friendly businesses initiative. And really what that looks like is that we're asking businesses to take a pledge to say that they will support customers who are breastfeeding in their establishment, and that they will also do everything they can to support employees who need to pump breast milk at work. And those are actually just two prongs of it, because those are the laws. There's a state law that protects women breastfeeding anywhere that they are legally allowed to be, and there's a federal law that requires employers to provide adequate time and space to employees to pump for up to a year after the baby is born. And so what we're really asking is just that businesses make it public and make it known that they're aware of these laws and that they've done what they can to enact them and provide support to women in our community who are breastfeeding.
Right. Well, we're in favor of breastfeeding, and Megan, you're a dietitian.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you explain why we are so in favor of breastfeeding?
Well, we know that there are numerous health benefits to the mom, the child, but also we know there are benefits to the employer. For the baby, we know that breastfeeding can actually allow for fewer or less severe instances of illnesses, such as diarrhea, ear infection, respiratory tract infection. It can decrease the risk of a child getting type 1 and type 2 diabetes, childhood leukemia, sudden infant death syndrome. We even know that it can decrease their risk for childhood and adult obesity. So there's absolutely huge benefits for the baby, but also for the mom. We have found that a mom that breastfeeds has a decreased risk of developing type 2 diabetes, breast and ovarian cancer. They have a decreased risk of getting postpartum depression. It also helps moms to get back to their pre-pregnancy weight, and it's a financial benefit for families as well with not having to purchase formula.
So why would it be helpful to the employer?
Yes, research shows that employees, mothers who have support from their employers to breastfeed and to have that time and space they need, have higher productivity, they have increased organizational loyalty to their business. The business tends to have improved recruitment and retention rates if they have a breastfeeding program. Greater job satisfaction, as I said, but we've also found from the customer standpoint that breastfeeding moms will patronize businesses that they know are supportive of them nursing their child.
Right. So, but you spoke, Jen, earlier about the law.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that surprises me. There's a law. I mean, we've made a law in the state. Explain that a little bit further.
So it is a new law. It was passed last summer in 2015, and the law essentially protects women who are breastfeeding in a public space and says that they are allowed to do that in any place that they are legally allowed to be. Prior to that, we'd had a law that passed in 2002 that was simply stating that breastfeeding is not considered indecency. So what South Dakota had prior to this was just, you're not going to get arrested for this. But now it's protected, and so that's in keeping with all the other 49 states, in that we're protecting women who are making that choice to give their babies the optimum nutrition.
Now, having heard your TED Talk about 2 years ago, it makes me think that maybe you had something to do with that new law. Let me ask you that question.
I don't think so. It might have been something where, I do think this is a national movement where we're seeing a return to really the default, which is breastfeeding, and so just wanting to protect women who are making that choice and realizing that it just wasn't on the books to be protected. And so if there's a culture shift where people feel uncomfortable doing that, people I think wanted to have legal protection to feel more comfortable.
Okay. Joni?
Great. Well, let's take our first break, and we'll come back and continue the discussion. And we'd like for you to call in if you have questions, 692-1430, and we'll be right back. Talk Radio. Thank you for listening today. We have some special in-guest studios, and we're talking about the breastfeeding initiative and the importance of breastfeeding to all communities. But right now, Brookings is particularly looking at this. We have Jen Anderson and Megan Lavacek. I keep wanting to put the H in there. Okay, forgive me.
So it just, you know, I always talk about the advantages of exercise to the body. I mean, and it goes on, including cancers and all these things that people don't even think of. But the fact that you address the studies that have shown breastfeeding prevents in that baby leukemias and SIDS and diabetes and obesity. Now, explain that a little bit further. Where is the science, you two? Let's hear a little bit more about that. I mean, we can make claims,
Sure.
but where is the science?
Basically, it's the nutritional composition of the breast milk and the immunological benefits that they get. You can't man-make those type things. You can't make that in formula.
Or
So,
man or female made?
Yes.
okay. Thanks. So, you know, I wish I had a list of, you know, the nutritional components that would maybe help to make a little bit more sense. But basically, the certain things that you get in breast milk, you can't make through formula.
A couple things I would add. So, and this I learned from our wonderful friend Marilyn Hildreth, who is a lactation consultant, and they are a wealth of knowledge on this issue as well. Is that one of the ways that it protects against SIDS is that breastfed babies wake more often at night. Sorry, moms, but they don't get into as deep of sleeps as you would with formula. So the babies are so tired, they're in such a deep sleep that there's a greater risk of them having SIDS. And so when you're breastfeeding on demand and you're breastfeeding overnight, the baby's waking, you're checking on it, it's not falling into as deep of a sleep. That was part of the reason for that. The other thing that I had learned from a WIC officer, or not officer, but representative, and WIC is also an excellent breastfeeding resource in town.
Women, infant, children.
Yes, women, infants, and children.
It's a national sponsored program.
Absolutely. Is that one of the ways that it protects against things like obesity or diabetes is that when you're breastfeeding, the baby is more likely to be able to stop eating when it's full. And so, you know, if you've got formula that's super expensive and you've got this whole bottle, you're like, oh, please finish this. I paid for this dearly.
Right.
Whereas when you're breastfeeding, you're like, oh, you're done. Thank God. Go to dad. So what happens in the baby's brain is that they're understanding hunger cues and cues of being full and what that looks like. And so at a very early stage, they're understanding how that operates. That's one of the explanatory mechanisms for
Right.
it.
Well,
I just want to say one of the reasons that babies wake up more often, like you mentioned, with breastfeeding is because that food is so perfect
Yes,
for them.
digest.
They digest that food very, very well, and it kind of just goes back to what is nature telling us that's the perfect food. And so babies digest that easily. Well, then they wake up because they're hungry again. Perfectly normal and natural,
Absolutely.
and the best thing to do for the babies if you can.
well, and I think, and I want to do a little diatribe on the value of the normal milieu of the bugs in the world. You know, I just wrote an essay on acne, acne rosacea in adults and acne vulgaris in juveniles, and there is data to suggest that the people in a modern world, right, in an industrialized world, have terrible acne, and that juveniles in the third world, in those undeveloped countries, don't have acne. And why would that be? The reason is perhaps it's from the soap that we're using, and it's just so clean, and we've dried out all our natural oil glands, and they're hypertrophying to try to make up for the oil that we've taken away with the soap. But also because we've messed with our normal flora. And you know, if you think about how important the normal flora is, we don't realize how important that flora is. There are more tiny bugs and bacteria and yeast and fungus and all of the things that are microscopic in the world. There are more of those cells on us, in us, around us, part of us, than there are cells of human.
So you're making the comparison, or the breastfeeding is that with the mom's breast, the baby's exposed to the normal, natural.
What do you think happens when a little baby crawls up on the belly of the mama and is laying there, and then from her skin of her breast, she or he wraps themselves around that mama's normal flora? Well, the normal flora of the mama becomes the normal flora of the baby very quickly. The baby's perfectly sterile in that little sac of fluid that she or he is alive within the uterus. But once you burst out into the world, the dirty, quote unquote, dirty world, well, the normal world, then a normal flora needs to be developed. I mean, and I always liken it to the grass on a lawn, or the prairie grass that grows on across the prairie. And if you kill the grass on that lawn, it isn't grass that comes back. It's weeds. It's weeds that pop up. I mean, they're there. And the most powerful way to treat invading weeds, as we all know, is to make a lush lawn of grass. And so it was with the prairie.
There is some research that's talking about what you're talking about. It's looking at the microbiome of the...
That's the right word,
right.
The microbiome.
Of the baby's stomach and digestive system, and all of the really small microscopic things that are in mom's milk that go into the baby's body, and so that's creating a protective layer, I suppose, in their stomach and that kind of thing. So that's part of what aids with digestion and all of those types of things.
Well, and it's not
And
just
being protected about the infections and all that.
right. It isn't just the milk too. It's
Right.
the skin of mom.
Mm-hmm.
It's the mom's
Contact.
microbiome, and
Well, it also speaks to vaginal births versus C-sections. That
Exactly.
We like for babies to have that experience of the exposure and the normal germs and
if you
microbes.
can, if you can.
Certainly,
Right.
but C-sections are wonderful in a needed situation, but if we can do the natural, then we want to do that as well.
But we can talk about C-sections rate in Brookings versus in the rest of the world. Do you know what the numbers are, Jen?
don't. I
Isn't it
don't
like
even-
12% here?
I know we're
It's
a lot less than
12%
normal,
here,
but is
and
it
it's
20?
20% almost everywhere, or 30% elsewhere. And part of that is because people are rotating shift delivering groups,
GYN.
and they don't want to stay up all night long and let it happen naturally, and it's a little easier. I mean, it's just that human nature. I mean, I point a finger at the GYNs or whatever it might be, but it's human nature to want to have a decent night's sleep and so on. So that's what happens. C-sections occur more frequently elsewhere. Not in Brookings, I should say, though. We have a remarkably, beautifully, wonderful low C-section rate. That is because it's allowed to occur as naturally as possible here, because we got really quality people.
And I think that, that actually, talking about birth issues, that's where we started thinking about breastfeeding issues. This is where that issue came up for our community. Myself and other SDSU faculty had partnered with the Brookings Health System about their doula program, and then we said, well, what's your next step? What else would you like to see change in Brookings? And they said breastfeeding. They were already working on becoming a baby-friendly hospital, and they're the only non-Indian Health Services hospital in South Dakota to have that designation, which means that they do everything they can to help women get off on the right foot with breastfeeding. But they said, women need more than just their medical professionals right after birth helping them to be able to breastfeed. And it's more than just having a lactation consultant. It's once you get that biological part figured out, okay, I know how to get the baby latched and I've got enough milk and we're going. If you return to work or if you want to go out in the community and shop, then that's where sometimes there's these structural barriers, these social barriers to continuing to breastfeed for as long as you and the baby would like. And that's why we've done this program.
Let's talk about the social barriers. Is it better to take a break?
We
Joni?
better take our second break. We again invite you to call us at 692-1430 if you have questions. We'll be right back. Prairie Doc Radio. We're here talking about the breastfeeding initiative in Brookings and a lot of things about babies and the wonderful care that we have in Brookings. Can we talk a little bit about, you talked about the barriers that people can have. What is it that Brookings is doing and that the other communities in the state are following, or maybe not following, but also doing to help mothers, help families with breastfeeding and the natural factors that go with that?
So yeah, once you get over the biological barriers that you might have or challenges, one of the social barriers or challenges that women talked about in our focus groups was that they might not feel comfortable breastfeeding in public. And you know what was so fascinating? It wasn't that they felt uncomfortable doing it. They said, I feel comfortable, I know how to do it, I know I can do it in a way that is, modest or what have you. But they said, I'm afraid I'm gonna make someone else uncomfortable. I'm afraid someone else around me is not gonna be okay with this. And that is really what this initiative is about. It's not that mothers aren't able to do that or don't feel comfortable doing that or that it's something they shouldn't do. They absolutely should. And I think by and large, most people in our community aren't bothered by it. They're not concerned, but moms don't know that. And especially first-time moms, they're kind of afraid, and it's an isolating thing when you're home with your child breastfeeding. And we just want to invite mothers to come out into the community, patronize our businesses, be a vital part of the community. And when your baby is hungry, feed it. And that's really what this initiative is about, is breaking down that barrier, changing the culture, and making it a non-event. It shouldn't feel like it's a big deal to feed your baby when it's hungry.
Now, when you gave that TED Talk, you said that there are people who are not used to it and have spoken out against it and so on and so forth. What is that data and why is it that way? I mean, what can we do about those people?
Oh, those people. Yeah, Megan, go ahead and speak to that.
I think our goal, like Jen has said, is to culture change. We also want to reframe nursing in public. And so it's kind of just changing that viewpoint of breastfeeding being inappropriate or sexual and changing that viewpoint to being that giving a mom praise and support because she's really trying to give her child a gift, which is the healthiest start to life. And so that's our goal, is to help kind of change their mindset. And I think the more people see a mom nursing and it's not covered up for or it's thought of as a shameful thing, the more open we will all be with it and the more welcoming people will become to that.
I think that's it. I mean, the more it happens, the more it becomes
Just the norm.
the norm.
Yes.
Then it's a better deal. Cover up is not the right word because, of course, we want the mom to cover up in an appropriate manner.
Sure.
But, my point is,
Yeah.
you can do it in such a way that it is not at all
You can do it in a tasteful way.
in a very tasteful way. As I saw you breastfeed your baby
On stage.
in front of the TED group on this talk, although I didn't know you were doing it until I realized halfway through, by golly, she's breastfeeding her baby.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. I bet many people listening have been around someone who was breastfeeding and you didn't even know. And that's kind of the point.
That's the point.
You don't need to know, and it doesn't need to be a whole event. And I also don't want moms to feel like that when they are breastfeeding, that, if they want to do that, they're making some kind of political statement and they have to make a stand and it's a whole, I don't want the pressure to be on them. I want us as a community to come around alongside them and support them with that best nutritional choice. So
It is not a sexy thing
No.
to do. No, it's a motherly thing to do for
Indeed.
the baby.
exactly.
Don't get upset about this. Come at it.
Yeah.
Be part of the value of the baby because it's truly, truly helpful for that baby.
Indeed. So that's one of the barriers that we're working to address. And the other one is if mom returns to work, she can have a barrier in terms of having the time and the space that she needs to pump. So if she doesn't have that, her supply can go down, and then that means that she can't breastfeed for as long as she might want to. It's a supply and demand issue. If you can't pump often enough, your
Then
body
you can't do it.
Yeah, you're telling your body, I don't need this much milk, and it doesn't create it anymore.
So let's ask that question. How long is it appropriate that a person would breastfeed? I mean, that's a huge question
Yes, it
because
is.
there's a lot of different answers.
Yes, there are.
The American Academy of Pediatrics, their recommendation is to exclusively breastfeed for the first 6 months. And then at 6 months to continue breastfeeding, but to also add in baby foods, complementary foods, up until 1. And that's kind of the goal, is to breastfeed through
Till
a
1.
year. And then absolutely we want moms to feel that they can breastfeed longer than that if it's mutually desired by mom and baby.
And there are some studies that indicate, worldwide and over time, that the natural age, if you allow your child to wean themselves, that the natural age of weaning is between 2 and 6 years old.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I mean, I knew of a woman whose daughter was still breastfeeding at 6 years.
Really? Wow. Mm-hmm.
And, a lovely lady, just
Mhm.
loved her, and I love her daughter,
Mhm.
who is not, who is a person in our community, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I think it's just one of those great things about a mom and a daughter,
Mhm.
or a mom and a child,
Mhm.
that is, it's a positive thing.
Mhm.
2 to 6 years of age, through the ages, when there wasn't enough food,
Right,
or
exactly.
ability as a baby to eat,
Mhm.
or find food, and mom would at least always have the food.
Mm-hmm. And breast milk is still nutritional, it just isn't their primary source of nutrition. And that's another barrier that this particular project isn't necessarily addressing, but sometimes moms feel like when they're breastfeeding an older child and extended breastfeeding, that is when they get more looks or something, because it's not as typical.
Guff.
It just isn't. And so that's another, that's something for a later project.
Yeah.
I
It
think
doesn't affect as many people,
If
so.
mom is happy and baby is happy, I
That's
think we
exactly
need
right.
to support them.
So you're a pediatric person, Joni. What's your comment about that late date?
As long as you can nurse their baby is great. If you're
Mhm.
comfortable and the baby's comfortable, they're getting benefits.
Now,
I just,
now there's also this, when a woman has trouble, or
Mhm.
there's a lot of things pulling on her
Mhm.
as the mama, and she doesn't do it to 6 years or 8 years of age, and then there's guilt.
Right.
But address that a little bit, would you please?
I think it's really important, and that's something we want to make sure we make a point of for this project. We never want a mom to feel guilty for using formula. That's not the
Mhm.
goal. Absolutely not. It's a mother's choice. If a mother cannot or chooses not to breastfeed, we don't want to make that mom feel guilty. For this project, our
Mhm.
focus is for those moms that have chosen to breastfeed. We want to help them meet their goals,
Mhm.
to make it more open in the community and for their employer to be supportive.
Mhm.
We never want a mom to feel guilty for a choice that she makes. Of
That's
course, we want her to
absolutely
breastfeed because there are nutritional benefits, but if she chooses not to, we don't want her to feel bad for that choice.
Okay,
That's
that's a
absolutely
good way of putting it. Now, you talked about solid foods at 6 months, and there's a lot said about cow's milk. At what age? Some people are saying now that instead of making people get into milk allergies and problems with milk and milk allergies versus milk intolerance, which are two different things, that you start that milk earlier. I heard this from an allergist lately. So I'm asking the dietitian, let's talk about what kind of foods to start at 6 months, and at the end of your comments, maybe one comment about milk, cow's milk.
Usually at 6 months, what we encourage is that you start with cereal, so some kind of rice or whole grain, oats, that type of thing. You mix it with the breast milk, or if you're doing formula, you mix it with the formula. That's what you should start with. Once they have had that for a couple weeks and they're doing well, then you can start adding in fruits and vegetables. What we encourage to do, I used to work at the Wickoffs in Sioux Falls. What we always tell our moms to do is start with one type of fruit or vegetable first, give it 5 to 10 days, make sure that baby is happy and healthy, then move on to the next fruit or vegetable, because you want to make sure they have time to know if there is an allergic reaction in between. And then absolutely meat can be introduced as well, but the same thing, you want to introduce one thing at a time so you can know if there is any allergic reaction.
So the things that people don't eat enough of is really fruits and vegetables. I would encourage people to make sure that once you started the baby food, fruits and vegetables, that you would continue adult food, baby fruits and vegetables in their diets. If you're the guiding force of the diet in that household, I mean, sometimes it's the man, sometimes it's the woman. Most of the time, it's a woman.
I was telling our family the story of an adorable kindergarten physical yesterday with a little guy, and when I asked, what kind of foods do you normally eat, his top 3 were cheese, pizza, and ice cream. And when I asked him about vegetables, he just had this
no idea what a
blank
vegetable
look on
was.
his face. It's like, oh dear, we do need a little education.
Oh, dear.
Good ice cream.
Yeah, so we
What a fun
do,
time.
certainly we want from the time children start their vegetables and their fruits, we want them to continue those as well.
You know, when we talk about micronutrients and we talk about nutritious things, you know, there's no question about it. Everybody always talks about, oh, what's the best food to keep from getting obese? What's the best food to give for nutrition? What kind of supplements do you need? And the answer is you need to eat fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
5 fruits a day and fruit and vegetables. Let's say that again. Fruits and vegetables. And then, of course, you can exercise.
Now, I did pull a little bit of data. We had talked earlier about breast cancer connection with breastfeeding. I can go into that, or we can leave it off.
No, let's say it quickly.
Very quickly. There's a lower breast cancer risk when you breastfeed for greater than a year. And why is that? Well, the mom is often having fewer menstrual cycles, which is decreasing the estrogen level. Often when people are breastfeeding, they're eating better because they're wanting to support the baby, so there's less cancer risk when you're eating appropriately. And then when you're breastfeeding, the breast sheds some tissues, and this helps to remove cells that have potential DNA damage. And so those are some of the things that the National Cancer Institute mentions as some of the preventative or the helpful benefits of breastfeeding. And then they do talk about the longer you breastfeed, the greater the benefit. There's a 4% reduction in breast cancer if a woman breastfeeds combined breastfeeding for over a year. So with multiple children, if they're combined that breastfeeding for over a year, they have a 4% reduction, and it doubles if you are breastfeeding over 2 years in a lifetime. So there is benefit to breastfeeding in preventing breast cancer.
And I do want to add before we run out of time that we do have SDSU students going out to businesses next week and the following week to personally invite businesses to become breastfeeding friendly. So for them to sign the pledge to say, yes, we support customers and we support employees in terms of breastfeeding.
Also, another important part of that is by taking the pledge, the businesses saying that they will put up a window cling that says breastfeeding welcome here. So then customers and employees know when they see that sign that that business is breastfeeding friendly.
And you can learn more about it at healthysd.gov/breastfeeding.
Oh, that's the SDSU and South Dakota State Health cooperative effort to try to encourage these kinds of things.
And Brookings Health System and the Chamber of Commerce.
There we go. See, and we've got all of these people supporting it. What I'm in favor of breastfeeding. I've often said this, and just because I'm a guy and we're normally interested in breasts, not go there, right? So, Bob, sorry, but anyway, I do think that it's important that this effort is supported, and I thank you very much. I want to remind people that tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, South Dakota Public Broadcasting will be showing another live show of On Call with the Prairie Doc. And tomorrow night we have 2 dermatologists, the famous Jim McGrander, and another one, John Wallner from Iowa, and Louis Hograff, who is a family physician and also a hospitalist and a hospital administrator at this point. Will be on, and we're going to be doing it from the Vermilion SDPB Broadcasting Center, because I'll be down there for a fraternity reunion and USD.
And all of these docs are fraternity brothers.
These are fraternity brothers of mine, and of course, you know that we will not have gone to any of the bars or anything before the show, but we're primarily going to be there with, and it'll be a fun show because these are dear friends and fraternity brothers. Louis I haven't seen in a long time, so it'll be a great time. I really want you guys to see the show.
Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll be back next week with On Call or with Prairie Doc Radio. I got to say my title right. Thank you for listening, and tune in next week.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Bob. Stay healthy out there.